Do you have nosy neighbors? Are they always looking at what's on your grill? Or do they randomly just pop up, say, hey neighbor, and talk to you for like 30 minutes when you're in a hurry? Perhaps they stare at you just a wee bit too long when you're in that swimming pool. Hey guys, I'm Dr. Tom Warren, and on this edition of The Plant Doctor, I want to talk about plants we can use to screen off those nosy neighbors. So the first plant I want to look at when we talk about screening off those nosy neighbors is emerald green Arborvitae. A great mid-sized tree, evergreen, gets 10 to 15 feet tall. It'll grow about a foot a year for the first 5 or 6 years, and then it starts to slow down a little bit. It'll get 4 to 5 feet wide. USDA hardiness zones is going to be 4 to 9 on this plant. It likes full sun to part shade. One downside to Arborvitae is if the deer get hungry enough, they will eat this tree, and it'll look really funny. With the bottom half of the tree will be eaten out and the top half's all full where they can't get to it. That's just one thing to be aware of if you live in an area that's prone to having deer issues. But this tree, once established, is drought tolerant and is a great screening plant. You can plant these on like 4 to 6 foot centers, and in a few years they'll grow in. They're just the right height to block off that nosy neighbor, and they're not going to get so wide or so tall that they're an obstruction in your yard. Emerald green Arborvitae. One of the more popular screening plants in my area is Nellie or Stevens holly. This is a great drought tolerant option for screening off. Evergreen shrub, pyramidal in shape, gets about 15 to 25 feet tall, grows really fast. It's going to get maybe 10 to 12 feet around. USDA zones 6 to 9. Interesting thing about Nellie or Stevens holly, once it's mature a little bit, it'll put on a red berry in the winter. And we've actually, at my house, we'll come out and get clippings off of this with the berries on it and use it as decoration in the house in and around Christmas time. So in the middle of winter, it has these beautiful berries on it. Also, the leaves here do have a few little thorns on them as well. That's something to be aware of if you have small children, or if your neighbors are just that nosy and you don't want them walking through the shrubs. That's a good way to keep them out. One to consider, Nellie or Stevens holly. One that I have in my yard down the left-hand side of my backyard is oak leaf holly. I love this holly as a screen. It's going to get about 15 to 20 foot tall, 10 to 12 feet wide. USDA zones 7 to 9 for your oak leaf holly. Great full sun plant. Just like with Nellie or Stevens, we're going to get covered in red berries in the winter. I like this one over Nellie or in the fact that it grows a little more dense. Nellie can, for lack of a better term, be a little leggy at times. You can see through it almost. You're not seeing through oak leaf. And just like oak leaf, or just like Nellie or Stevens, the leaves have spines on them as well. A good screening plant to consider for those nosy neighbors, oak leaf holly. One of my favorite shrubs in general, when I have somebody say, Dr. Warren, what's your favorite shrub? This one gets up there towards the top of the list. This is tea olive, Osmanthus fragrans. USDA zone 7 to 10. Great shrub for screening off nosy neighbors. You can keep this pruned in the 10 to 12 foot tall range. I've seen them get as tall as 15 to 20 feet tall and a spread of 8 to 10 feet, but you can keep them pruned just over head height. These right here, they don't look full right now, but as they mature, they will get full. I've seen them in full sun do fantastic. I've seen them in heavy shade do fantastic as well. I've seen them in clay soils. I've seen them in sandy soils. Just a great all-around shrub. One of my favorite things about tea olive, in addition to blocking off those nosy neighbors, is the fragrance that it gives off. This shrub gets a tiny white flower, somewhat in the spring, but especially in the fall. And you can be on the other side of the yard and you can smell it, just an incredible fragrance. So we get great fragrance, it's evergreen, It's drought tolerant. We can plant it in shade, sun, doesn't really get any diseases. This is one of those, once it's established, you can kind of forget about it. Water it the first year, and after that, leave it alone. One of my favorites. This is tea olive. This is the Japanese anise, or also known as Alyssium. Besides being a great screening plant that is evergreen, if you ever take the leaves, crack one and smell it, it actually smells like licorice. It's a nice scent. But another great screen to keep those nosy neighbors out of your business. This one you can keep in the 6 to 8 foot tall range, and it'll get 4 to 5 foot wide as well. USDA zones. This is the northern edge for Alyssium where I'm at in North Alabama. It's listed zones like 8 to 10, 8 to 11, somewhere in there. But still a great screening plant for any screening needs that you may have. This is Alyssium. We often don't think of magnolias as a screening plant, but Little Gem Magnolia is a great tree to screen with. Gets 15 to 25 feet tall, USDA zone 7 to 9, does need full sun. If you're getting part shade or full shade, this is not the plant for you. Great flowers in the summertime. It'll get white flowers about the size of a saucer dish. And then in the winter, it'll have red berries as well. So those flowers will fall off, there'll be a fruit, and it's covered with red berries. So it provides a nice attraction to the landscape, both in summer and fall and winter with the berries, and will also screen off those nosy neighbors for you. Little Gem Magnolia. A plant that you can just pretty much stick in the ground and forget about it. Once it's established, you're not gonna have any problems with this. This is Cleyera, and this shrub can get up to about 10 feet tall. The good thing about Cleyera, I've been planting this in the ground since I was a teenager. I've planted this in red clay soils, almost anaerobic gray soils, sandy soils, and it does fine. This is one of those shrubs, literally stick it in the ground, forget about it. Nice, dense foliage, no flower color to speak of. It has a very small, inconspicuous flower. No fall color, it is an evergreen, but once mature, this will be thick and dense and lush, and those neighbors are really gonna have to stretch to see into your yard. These are babies right now, but they will get extremely tall, up to 15 feet tall, 15, perhaps 20 feet wide. This is green giant Arborvitae. This is a cousin to one we just looked at, emerald green. Gets much larger, grows much faster as well. This is full sun. It can take some part shade, but I would not put this in full shade. You need at least 6 hours of direct sunlight a day to successfully grow these in a fast manner. USDA zones 5 to 8 on your green giant Arborvitaes. A great shrub, or excuse me, a great tree, because it does get big if you have the space to grow it. A plant that makes a good screen in a part shade environment is Camellia japonica, or the Japanese camellia. Also provides some nice flowers into the winter months as well. This is one of the slower growing shrubs that you could actually use. It would take several years for this to become a screen, but once it's a screen, it makes a fantastic screen. These can get 6 to 8 feet tall. I've seen some get even taller. Further south of here, like in South Alabama, I've seen some of these get 10 to 15 feet tall, but in my area, they typically don't get that tall. An acid lover, pH soils of between 5.5 and 6.5. You get into alkaline soils, they don't do quite as well. But for those part shade environments where you need a good screen, consider Camellia japonica. These have not been pruned in a fashion to be full and bushy, but they would. If you were to prune them, they'll fill out and they'll make a nice screen. But the interesting thing about camellias, you can have them tree form, you can have them bush form, you can even have them espaliered across the side of a house. These are great screening shrubs, even though this particular specimen here does not necessarily showcase that feature. I want to thank our friends at Pax Nursery for making this video possible. They invite us out here to film on occasion, and this wouldn't be possible without them. I'll leave a link to their website down in the description below. Proudly serving North Alabama since 1968. If you're in the area, go check them out. They have a great selection of plants. Guys, as always, thank you for watching The Plant Doctor, and until next time, happy gardening.